All right, we are live. We are locked in. You are locked on. We are live. This is Misaligned. Welcome to another episode of the Misaligned podcast where we talk about all the things that you want to talk about, but maybe you feel like you can't have those conversations. But we are going to have them. And this is going to be one of those contentious topics, I think, for a lot of people who are interested in misalignment around things. So, what are we talking about today? Religion, right? It's one of those things that is extremely powerful and instrumental in societies today, and it's quite critical in terms of how we've existed as humans. But maybe that's debatable. We're going to be looking at a couple of areas, but
in terms of how
without
we
further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jab,
human.
who's going to be
Maybe
moderating
that's
today's
useful.
conversation to
We're
kick
going to
this
be
topic.
looking at a couple of areas, but in terms of without further ado, I'm going to hand over.
Jab, over to you.
Okay. Right. Evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us. So, religion is a very big subject. Um, Now, what the thing we're going to try and be discuss tonight is, well, a few things really. Is religion a tool for control? Is it a moral compass? And also, how has it shaped empires and organized society in the past? I am hoping that one of the things that we all agree on, well, I'm going to lay a thesis, if I can put it that way, but I'm hoping that we all have an agreement on that. And so here it is. Personally, I'll tell you a bit about myself. I've said this in the past, but I'll just recap it. So my family is, half of my family is Muslim, the other half is Christian. Myself, I have been Catholic and then Pentecostal Christian. So I won't say I know all of them to the same extent, but I have had encounters and experience across those uh, main religions, as it were, in Nigeria. Now, a friend of mine, whilst I was in university, developed cancer, and they suffered, and eventually they died. And this is despite us praying and fasting and for context, I don't think it's changed. But when I was in university, we went on evangelism. So I was a medical student. We went on, to the wards, and we prayed for our patients to get healed and to get cured. I won't say that I ever saw anybody healed as a result of that. And then back in the days, there used to be, it's still the case, I'm sure, big crusades, we used to call them. So you meet in massive stadia and lots of prayers, and there are all these people who come with in wheelchairs, people who come with all kinds of diseases, and it is believed that some of these people are actually cured by the ministers of God who are praying. So that's the context. To cut long story short, I eventually did leave. I gave up religion altogether and I became agnostic because for me, I could not square the God who is kind and who is caring and who would allow a servant of his to die, and not just die, but like with that amount of suffering. So for that reason, I became agnostic. And I would say that I came to a point almost of saying that I was an atheist. But my current position is that I can't prove that there is no God. However, I am convinced that if there is a God, he is not going to be the person that is described in the religious text that I have described to you all. Because I do not see, when I look at the world, I do not see a God who is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. In other words, a God who is all powerful, all kind, all knowing. I do not feel that those three qualities can describe the same God. So, is there a God? Maybe, maybe not. My position is I don't know. But if there is a God, my feeling is that he does not interfere contrary to what is described in these books, because when we look at the world, there's suffering, it doesn't look like God intervenes. He set the rules, he's set the universe and put the rules and all the equations, and he is not interested, and he has just taken the back seat. So I'm hoping that we are all agreed on this, and we can now go on and discuss the much more meatier issues. So maybe we'll start with moral compass. So Cross, I'll come to you first. What do you think? Is religion a moral compass? Does religion make people good, um, or not?
When I think about things like religion, I often think about just general principles like HR policies, essentially. Right? To me, it's very simple. You have things that are put in place to be able to create some kind of order for some kind of reason. I don't think Christianity necessarily was intended as a moral compass. The same way I don't think a lot of policies that are established in organizations or in firms, companies, etc., are really defined as moral compasses. But adding that morality is a necessary part. You'd have things like codes of conduct, which are basically morality clauses that are added into your contracts, etc. I think initially, I think without diving into the other piece, I think initially religion, fundamentally rather than initially, religion is a tool. First and foremost, it's a tool that's used for different purposes. But the fundamental purpose of religion, in my view, rather than rather than it being a tool of redemption or something that allows you to find a pathway to God or to the afterlife or anything like that, I don't believe in any of that, which we can jump to obviously as we get along. But fundamentally, it is a tool of control. Karl Marx said that everybody knows that quote anyway. It's the opium of the masses, right? For good reason as well. If you tell people that the suffering that you have right now or the challenges that you have right now would be resolved in the future in a world that you can't see, can't predict, can't taste, can't have any interaction with whatsoever, it stops them from looking for that here, which prevents uprising, it prevents discontent, and it gives people an alternative to the current existence. And that's my view. It creates that control. Now, as regards the concept of the moral compass and guiding people, it depends on how religion is used. And that's the reason why we have multiple different dispensations, in my view. There are different ways of viewing Christianity. There are different ways that, the different flavors of Christianity, because there are different moral compasses within Christianity in itself. Even Islam is a very similar thing. The big ones that everybody knows about are the Shiites and the Shia and the Sunni flavors of Islam, which guide two different moral compasses within the same umbrella of that religion of Islam. Within Christianity, there's multiple, and we know them already. They even got to the point where they say, look, we're even protesting, we're Protestants. We're just protesting against, your own system or your own way of doing it, right?
So let me prod a bit. When you say these different religions within religion define different moral compass, what do you mean?
I'll give you an example.
Because to my mind, Sunni or
Shia.
or Shiite, it's still Islam. They still insist on, recommend praying, let's say 5 times a day, the zakat and pilgrimage, and be nice to other people, treat other people with respect, and all of those things. So to my mind, you could argue that actually, there is all religions or most religions kind of tell you the same thing, which is treat other people with respect, be nice and be kind, don't steal, don't hurt another person.
Yeah,
would you agree? Or
no, well, kind of, because again, it depends on the nitty gritty. When you have to get down into detail and say, well, what are we talking about moral compass? So, for example, I'm not going to name the specific flavor of the church or whatever, but there's a church that looks at Christianity and says, well, you can't wear earrings, you need to wear a specific length of clothing when you go to church.
I see where you're coming from. Right,
exactly.
Okay.
So people who do not follow that level of morality, to that level of detail, are seen as immoral.
Yeah.
Which is a challenge. There's some that say you can't drink alcohol, and because if you drink alcohol, that's a problem. And then the others that use that as part of communion and say, well, you must drink alcohol, during this specific act or this specific almost ritual, I would say. So that morality in itself is based on perspective. It's not an absolute. It depends on the application of the morality of the structure that's been created by that specific dispensation.
So this is kind of different to what religions tell us, because in religion, what they teach fundamentally is that morality is absolute, isn't it?
True.
They do.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's very
So
true.
I hear Yemi. I see Yemi nodding his head. Yemi, do you want to go with that?
Yes, but I
Let
did.
me one sec. So when you look at, you can pick any of the religions. It seems to me that what they're saying is morality is absolute. You know, if you do ABC, you go to heaven. If you don't, you go to hell. At least for the three big monotheisms or monotheistic religions, right? So particularly the Eastern religions, maybe things are slightly different, because some of them don't believe in the conception of heaven and earth. So I'll let you make a comment on that, but I don't think I think he's stylishly dodged my question. My question was, does religion make you a good person?
Okay,
Go on,
so
Yemi.
so thank you. So and I was just going to talk about that distinction between religion as we tend to know it, often in the Western and in a place like Nigeria as well, for example, where most people are sort of religious from a Judeo-Christian type, and Islam, because they're all kind of one in a sense. They all kind of emanate from the same traditions. And things like the Eastern religions, where there's a massive difference in how they conceptualize a lot of things, including, the concept of God, the concept of morality, and the concept of the afterlife. So, in that sense, talking about religion by lumping all of them together almost becomes a little bit difficult, because it's almost like talking about sports. You talking about football on the one hand and talking about ice skating. They're very different things, even though there are some commonalities. So, and I suppose from how the conversation has gone, I imagine a lot of our talk would be around the things that we're familiar with the most: Christianity, Islam, and maybe a bit of Judaism, because they've kind of come out of us. Now, my idea about religion is, I tend to take a bit more neutral view of religion with regards to things about whether it's good or bad, or whether it's a source of morals or not. I just view religion more as a thing. Okay, and what is this thing? I think Carl Jung talked about the collective unconscious, and the context for this is that we, as humans, as individuals, we do a lot of what we do unconsciously. In fact, often when we learn, when we get trained or learn about stuff, what we are doing is consciously programming our unconscious to be competent at doing something. And that's what we do with children as well. So when you tell children, this is the rules, this is bedtime, this is when you get up, this is when you go to school, this is how you talk to people, effectively what you're doing is conditioning them. You are trying to cement something into their unconscious, so that when they are free and they get out, they just behave that way, right? And so that's at an individual level. At a societal level or a group level, there's also a collective unconscious. There's also a group unconscious, where something has to bind people together that then becomes a form of shared unconscious, where we don't have to rehearse all these ideas and rules all the time. You learn them through stories, folktale, music, fellowship, whatever you want to call it, right? And religion fits into one of those boxes, I think. Okay, so culture, the concept of culture in a wider sense, gives collective unconscious, but religion is also one thing that functions hugely with regards to that. Now, like all things, culture and whatnot, it can be good or bad. It can be beneficial or not. It can be corrupted or not. And so then you have to unpack precisely what you're talking about. And then, so, that's my general sense of religion. I'm sure we'll come to a bit more fine details, but that's just my understanding of what religion is as a thing. It is a thing. It's neither good or bad, no bad, but it can be good, it can be bad. It depends on context.
Yeah, I want to add to that just before you move this on a little bit around.
Sure.
Initially I talked about it being a tool, and Yemi's essentially saying a similar sort of idea. And in terms of the morality aspect, it to his point, he got his spot on. It's neither good or bad. It's just a tool. It's a thing. that we can then build on to decide what it is. So religion can be used, and we have fanatics that come out who do insane things in the world. You know what I mean? And those things that they do are seen almost universally outside their very narrow viewpoint of the world, are seen as bad. Or most people say, this is bad, but they see it as good in their view. It doesn't matter either way, whether it's good or bad. No. All that matters is that you have a system of control, you have a system of morality that applies to that person or to that group of people that works for them and for their objectives as either a society, a group, or even a familial unit in some cases. The same way that some families that have their own religion within their houses. Does it work for them? Yes. Then does it matter whether or not it's good or bad? Don't know. I don't think the morality itself is a key concept or is a key principle to even bother about, to be honest.
It's almost like an artifact, isn't it? It almost becomes an artifact of. So it's not the thing itself; it's an artifact of it. And like all artifacts, it can then be good or bad. There are, it depends on, and you might argue, and I'm sure we'll come to that in many cases these artifacts are bad, and I'm not going to dispute that. But fundamentally,
Okay. This is very interesting because I think we're kind of aligned on this. But it's interesting because when you speak when you speak to somebody who has religion or people who are quite religious, one of the first things they talk to you about the importance of religion is that it's a framework for morality. They're very, very clear about this, and this is why they embrace a particular religion. And whether that is we don't drink alcohol or women should dress a certain way, don't take your neighbor. So it's I don't know whether you guys have heard this saying, which is religion is a way of life. So what's interesting is the first time I heard this was actually when I was a Christian, and I believe that was the case. And then much later in a conversation with a Muslim friend who was trying to win me over, he's like, oh, Islam is a way of life because it tells you about how what to dress, how to dress, what to eat, when to eat. Do you know what I mean? So it's all encompassing, and it's your moral compass. How do you know something is good or bad? For someone who is religious, it's from the Holy Book. It's because God said A, B, C. So if you take away God, because one of the arguments against atheism is, if you take away God, how do you know something is good or bad? How do you know who decides whether anything at all is good or bad?
This is a very interesting
because sorry to interrupt you. You might have noticed that we were talking about this just before we came on the show, which is that a lot of our people back home openly kind of like criticizing their pastors and their imams and religion. You couldn't do that if you go back 10-15 years ago. You'd be when I first came on the internet and talking about religion and all that kind of thing, and you find a handful of people, you'd be like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. I was alone. I was the only person who was thinking these thoughts. So if we move to that era where religion isn't such an important force, how do we decide how to organize our society? How do we decide what is good or bad if there is no religion?
I mean, you can't because religion is just another tool. Would replace it with something that's very similar. That's what's going to happen. It would either replace it with governmental laws, regulations, stuff like that, or something else. But
okay.
Regardless, it's just.
I'm going to be a bit difficult here. So
go for it.
Let's take England
You're
for
going
instance.
to be misaligned. Call it spade a spade.
No. The reason this is important is you can go back to, let's say, England. You can't. Well, maybe you can, but the church and the state are intertwined, and a lot of the codes of conduct that we've got today have their roots in the Judeo-Christian tradition of this country. So even though today we kind of say there is separation of church and state, but actually, the clergy still sits in the House of Lords. So in a sense, if this country, for instance, were to make a non-religious law because of that tradition, because of how things are intertwined, I don't know that you can say it's completely devoid of, something came before. Do you know what I mean? Do you know where I'm going with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the reasons why religion stays around anyway, is because of the point that you're making about how do we have a compass, a fundamental way of deciding what morality is. Now, even if that way is right or wrong, doesn't matter. People like to have something that seems relatively objective to say, well, it's not me that's saying this is good or bad, it's somebody else. Humans naturally, we like to assign responsibility to others. We're not very good at taking on responsibility. We prefer that to lay elsewhere. And then in line with that, we also prefer responsibility to align to a higher power in some capacity. What higher power is there than a god or an entity that is omniscient, omnipotent, is omni everything, essentially, better than you in every single way? Well, he said I should do this thing, therefore I'm doing it. And then you can also just say, he said you should do this thing, so you are doing it. It's not me. I'm not the ruler of this city as a man made of flesh and blood. No, it's him, it's they, them, whatever you want to call that entity that's creating that. So I think, in my view, the separation would only occur if we have some other thing that we can assign the responsibility that is greater than most human beings or humanity in itself.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts what that framework might be?
I think the framework is going to end up being religion anyway. It's the same thing. Religion can only be replaced, in my view, by religion. There's nothing else that can replace it because it's in itself, it's the same concept. It just becomes, it's a tool. And the tool is that it's the sum of its parts. Religion is the sum of its parts, fundamentally. You have a set of, first, you have an authority. That's the first fundamental piece of religion. There's an authority figure underpinning all of that thing that says, I am that I am, or whatever it is that you want to say. There's an all-powerful authority figure. The second thing is the foundation around the laws that are required. Well, what can or can't I do? Right? And then the third part is the morality aspect of what should and shouldn't I do. Because there's a lot of parts about you can't do this, period. You do this, you're going to get, these are the things that apply to you. You should get killed, or you should get jailed, or you should get whatever. And then you have the what should more nuanced perspectives around, should you be nice? Should you be this? Should you be that? Should you be that? And then should you care for your neighbors, etc.? There's no real consequences around that, but we think we need to apply that. If you look at everything that applies in society, it's the same thing. Going back to my initial opening conversation about companies and organizations, it's the same concept that they started off with. It's the same thing. There's an authority figure, the CEO, the chief people officer, head of HR, director of HR, whatever, doesn't matter. There's somebody that says, these are the rules. And then what are the rules? These are things that you can or cannot do, period. If you do these things, you're contravening the things, but these are the things you must do, etc. And then the other parts that they add on top of, lay on top of it and say, maybe you shouldn't do these things. We don't really care that much, just to guide and arrange you. I see HR policies, I'll be perfectly honest, almost like religion. I don't see any difference between HR policies and religion. It's the same concept. You're guiding people's behavior toward a common goal. It's just that it's quite focused around the organization's objectives. But when you scale that and you take that in a wider perspective, what's the difference between that and applying that and it being religion? Same thing.
Okay. So I think this fits nicely into where I want us to move into the next, part two, which is I see religion as it may have started as a way to organize society, because obviously, you can look at every human society. It has its own idea of how we all came about, and I see religion as as culture, or a type of culture, or a subset of culture. And you can imagine that when people's first human gathering started, most people must have been thinking, how did we get here? What happens beyond here? If I die, where do I go? So I reckon that is how religion all started. And with time, as human populations expanded, it would seem to me like religion then became like a central, almost like a fulcrum for organizing the society, something that we all believe in. And there is no question about whether you agree that religion is a moral compass or not. The truth is that it did perform that function historically. And so we can all agree that, well, if we're going to be living together, we're not going to kill, you know, we're not going to steal from each other. We're going to be kind to each other, and we're going to have these festivals. And I reckon that this is probably how it all started. And with time, obviously, things expanded. And then we start to talk about when one culture then meets another culture, and then you have intercourse, and the weaker culture, religion gives way, and empires start, and they project their forces wherever they go, and then religion just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And kind of that's what happens with us when we came into contact with Europeans. Their religion basically subsumed all of ours, all of our religion, and all of those things became, we slowly got rid of them and adopted European religion, by and large, Christianity and all its various, factions. So, Yemi, I think maybe I'll come to you. What do you think about the place of religion in sort of like organizing society? I don't know whether you're aligned with me on this or whether you've got a different thought.
Yes, I think I'm largely kind of aligned with a lot of what you've said there with regards to the likely theories about how religions evolved, and I think it seems quite intuitive to think that, and there's actually evidence for that all we had in our early life as humans and early life of our civilization was just trying to explain things, okay, and you look up in the skies and you see the sun, you see the moon, and then the phases of it changing every month, and you think there has to be a mind behind this, like anyone would. Like if you see a car moving on the road, you'd have to think there's someone behind it driving, and it's just intuitive to think that, and so this becomes the first way in which we explain the world. But then out of that whole thing, which is effectively philosophy, okay, that is philosophy, came subsets, religion, science, and they just kind of, but all of it started with philosophy, just thinking, right? And that's all it is, and all humans do that. But I wanted to also talk about what it is today that we find that a lot of people who push back against religion find problematic about it. And I think effectively is one of a number of things. And one of it is the perception of dogma. So the thinking that people are believing things without evidence, okay? And that's the first problem that people identify and say, you make all these claims, you can't prove it, yet you're dead sure about the claims. And so there's a lot of sort of angst against that, understandably. But also the second part of it is the almost the fervor and the irrationality that comes with it, that's attached to religion. So apart from the fact that you believe this thing without being able to provide any evidence, and you believe it absolutely, you also have this strong attitude towards this thing that's almost unmovable, and which can sometimes lead to devastating consequences. And I think often those are the two things people push back on broadly. But what I say is there's nothing about these things that is inherently religious. Okay, this is how humans behave. So once if we take the problem to be religion rather than how humans behave and get rid of these things, all you do is get something else that then behaves exactly like that. For example, sports. Have you seen have you seen Celtic and Rangers playing the old firm derby? The police has to separate them till today. Like there has to be a police line between the fans, otherwise they'll kill each other. Like this is not a joke. Okay,
Yeah.
but all of us know that this is, and I know one's going to be arguing that football is not man-made or that, all of this isn't our creation, and that, why are you so angry with the other person? It doesn't matter. All this rationality doesn't matter in the heat of it. Like, people lose their minds, right? And so, and what we will not do is to get rid of Rangers and Celtic because of that, right? We have to just keep finding ways to mitigate these things and impose rationality on top of the irrationality that comes with human behavior. And often this is how religion begins to behave as well. So you find all these beautiful stories. I mean, you only need to read the Bible or read the Quran and see there's some excellent narrations there where they can become source of collective identity, collective strength, but like Celtic and Rangers, they can be devastatingly dangerous, right? There's no arguing against that. Like, people kill each other's children because of this stuff. And sorry.
No. You've said so many excellent points there. I wish I was writing and taking notes, but let's go back to, because I think the point you touched on here is really very important. This is where we now start to have like fundamentalists and extremists and the troubles that you're trying to describe that comes along with that. But what I wanted to say was, it does make sense, doesn't it, if religion started when at the infancy of humanity. It makes sense that the knowledge at that point would be so deficient in today's context, right? Such that to read a book that was written, let's say, 2,000 years ago, or a collection of stories written in that sort of time, they are going to be, to read them literally is, it's like a recipe for
it'll tell you nothing about how life works, how the scientific life works.
Exactly. And so I could branch out with this subject in so many different ways, because you look at Nigerian churches today and you look at all the drama around resurrecting people, curing them of diabetes, cancer, and all of those kind of things. Dead people do only one thing: they stay dead, right?
Yeah.
That's because when we say somebody is dead, we're saying they are dead. Those cells are dead. They're not moving. So to say that you bring somebody back to life, it totally defies logic. Oh, the notion of, let's say, virgin birth. I'm not picking at any particular religion. Or let's say animals talking, like a donkey speaking, or another human conversing, right? So the thing is that you've got to situate this thing. 2,000 years ago, the world was a very superstitious place. We didn't know how things came about. We didn't have cars, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have a lot of this technology that we take today for granted. So it does make sense that people will be superstitious. And a lot of those stories, and they're very beautiful stories, like you said, Yemi, I think that you have to me, I think that the way to interpret them is in allegorical terms, metaphors. They tell a very beautiful story. So I'll give you an example.
Like Harry Potter.
Like Harry Potter, thank you. So you've got to look at them in metaphor. So, but when people, particularly now when it comes to moral codes, when people insist that things have to be interpreted or understood in a literal sense, like they were understood 2,000 years ago, is going to be problematic in our current context. And I'm going to touch cross. I'm going to come to you in a moment. But earlier, I was calling you guys and saying, does religion make you good? Well, I'm going to answer that question. And the answer is, I don't think so. And the reason is, you can take a book, any religious text, and look at how God behaves in that text. You would notice that he behaves exactly like humans, right? He's got anger management, you talk about genocides, exterminations, all of it is there, right? So and nothing about slavery, and the Bible itself, because obviously colonization was done by Europeans, and in many cases they used God to justify what they were doing, right? There's nothing in there that says don't enslave another fellow human. What happened there?
It actually suggests that the slaves should be respectful to their masters.
Correct. Thank you. So there are codes about how to be a good slave, not don't enslave another human, right? So for that reason, I don't think that religion can be it doesn't make you a good person. I think that human decency, like Christopher Hitchens said, precedes religion.
Can I ask you a question though?
You may,
Because
yeah.
I don't disagree with what you've said, but I think the question itself, the question and the answer you've given, even though I agree with it, I think it hides something behind it. I'll explain to you. Once I ask the question, you'd see what I mean. Does it make you bad, religion? Okay, because I agree it doesn't make you good. Does it make you bad?
No, that is a very good question. So I don't think that's a really good question, Yemi. No, I don't think that religion makes you a bad person. Now, I agree with you, which is that
So
it's
they cancel out.
neither good. No, yes, it's neither good nor bad. I think it depends on the person.
Because I put it to you
However,
that the people who came to Africa to enslave Africa and use their religion, if they didn't have that religion, they would still have done that.
they would
I
still
put
have
it to
done
you.
that. Yeah, they still would have done that. They still would have done that.
Yes.
But now,
So
okay, let's take the example. Let's say a. I wish Farouk were here, but let's take the example of, let's say, a jihadist terrorist, right? Because that's when, or any fundamentalist for that matter, or extremist. No, let's stick with the jihadist terrorism. So they want a particular definition of Islam to be followed, and often their first casualties or casualties are usually other Muslims who do
the
not.
next door neighbors.
Exactly, the next door neighbors. Exactly. Even before they start to attack other Christians and other people, the first casualties are usually fellow Muslims. But their inspiration is that literal translation, isn't it, of the text. So although I can't say that it's the Quran that's made them do A, B, C, but they can draw inspiration, and
Inspiration for them.
you can see how they draw inspiration from from certain texts and from hadith. You can see that. But obviously I'm not going to say that it's the Quran that's told them to do that, because where's human agency otherwise? So I would agree with you that religion doesn't make you good or bad. I think it's a book, it's subject to interpretation. How you interpret it may then cause problem.
Can I throw some things in here, if
Yes.
that's all right? I've got a few thoughts. I'm going to go a bit more radical now, because I think we've been a bit soft on this topic generally. But for me, I think religion is in itself I personally think that religion is bad. Right? That's my foundational view about it. I do not think religion is a good thing.
Why?
And Jab, do you mind if I do a quick screen share? Just
Yeah,
on things?
go on.
Yeah. So the first one is going to be this. So this ties into the conversation we're having a bit earlier on about the truth aspect. And I'll do this, just two things. I'll do this on a video really quickly. But this is the first one. Do you see my screen? Can you see my screen? Yeah. This is one of the things, the truth value questions that we're talking about. So there's lots of, I mean, this is a bit, it's a bit, facetious slightly, but it's quite a fundamental thing. You can see loads of miracles just happening. Yes, there's lots of miracles. Cameras were invented. What happened? Everything dropped. Very similar to Bigfoot and the rest of them. It's like, oh yeah, there's loads of miracles happening. All the things that I put, for example, in the Bible. So, sun standing still, talking about the burning bush, donkeys talking to people, all these bears coming out from the woods to just eat people. All that stuff was great until the cameras were invented. Once camera was invented, it disappeared. Once Photoshop was invented, there we go. We've now got lots of miracles and everything happening all over again. That's one. So my thing around that is the issue with truth value. The existence of religion has issues with truth. Religion in itself dispels of any understanding of truth. To your point that you raised earlier about death, that when someone with the thing that kind of exactly how you said it, but it's like, well, A dead thing stays dead. That's the only thing that dead thing can do, right? Fundamentally. But religion will tell you that no, that's not the case. We're going to bring it back to life because religion. So you suspend logic and fact to be able to deal with that. That's my one fundamental issue. The other thing is a video I just want to quickly just jump into. It's about 25 seconds long, but that's all right, Jab. I'll try to do not extend my thoughts or my spiel too long around this. But can you see my screen?
Yeah.
There we go. All right.
I see no truth value in the claims of Christianity, the virgin birth, the resurrection. Do you believe Jesus was born a virgin?
There are elements of the text that I don't feel qualified to comment on. Like, I know from a metaphorical perspective and from a mythic perspective what the story of the virgin birth means, and I accept that. I know, for example, that any culture that doesn't hold the image of the woman and infant sacred dies.
I absolutely love this clip, Cross, and it's one of those that I can talk about till all night, and there's a reason for that. I don't know if it's all right for me to just jump in and say just one thing about this clip, and this is what I find most profound about it, because you have two people arguing, and two well-read people. They're both professors. They kind of in their own fields, they've got expertise, and they are arguing and in a sense talking past each other, because what both of them are saying from where I stand is absolutely correct. Okay, so what one's saying is that I read all these stories and I can't see any truth value in it. It's not true. The other one's saying, yeah, but truth isn't all that matters, and that's a fact. I mean, there is, we cannot, as human beings, we're not designed to function by just what is true. You love your children, and that's true from an experiential point of view. But why must that feeling occur? There's nothing true about it. It just happens to you, right? It's just you just feel the love, and it happens to you, and that's that. Okay, and you're happy with that. And then there's a lot of life that's like that. Okay, defies this concept of what's true or false, or that's not the framework to address everything. Okay, and if you're going to build a car or build a spaceship or treat diseases, then that's the framework you need. What's fact, what's true. But if you're going to be someone's friend or someone's neighbor or community, or what you need goes way beyond what is true or not, right? So there are different levels, and I think we talked about this the other day, where someone's trying to explain something at the level of oxygen and hydrogen, and another one explaining it at the level of water. They're both correct. The trouble is they just pick different levels of analysis. That's how I see what's going on there.
Okay. So, Cross, I know you haven't finished making your point, but can I just throw this there? You hear me? What do you think he meant by the society that stops looking at the virgin and her child dies? What do you think he is getting at there? This is a question for both of you.
So I can only kind of say something around that, having not looked at that particularly. But what I know Jordan Peterson does with these things very, very, he's read Carl Jung like way more than I have, and he knows something about this concept of the unconscious and the collective unconscious. And I think for some of us who've paid some attention to what the unconscious means to a person and to people, it's profound. It's more profound than we think. As you are, people can predict sometimes even more than you. So your social media feed can predict sometimes better than you what you prefer to read next week. Right. Okay. And the reason they can do this is because they know that all this comes unconsciously, and from picking up your trend, just picking up your trend, you can figure things out. So what I think the guy is saying there is some archetypal understanding of, again, it may not be true. As I'm saying, truth is not always the framework to explain something.
Okay. Do you think you might be talking about the death of the Western Empire, the Judeo-Christian Empire? Do you think that's what he might be talking about?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, because indeed. I think that's where he's going with this. So, for instance, now people talk about the post-Christian era, don't they, in Europe? post-Christianity, where in that, there's atheism. Nothing holds this society again since moving away from Christianity the way it used to be practiced, let's say 2 or 3 centuries, ago. And that, so because that's a subject that we haven't really talked about very much tonight, but it's how, aside from organizing society, it's also how you project your custom and your culture. For instance, in this instance, as the empire. So once upon a time, everything was all centered around Christianity. Everybody went to church. It defined everything. It defined, like we spoke earlier, what you eat, it was the moral compass of the society. It was the reason why they would go to a foreign country or other parts of the world to civilize them. It was because of that Christianity. Now that's gone, and you now have other competing ideologies, like you're saying, Cross, because that's what I was trying to push you earlier, which is that if you remove religion, how else would you organize society? If you say something is wrong or good, well, who said that? So now we've got there isn't anything left in the society, and it may explain why, apart from maybe consumerism, I think that is actually taking the space of religion. So now it's all about how much can we indulge in,
There's a lot of other things, but I think
yeah.
Cross will
But,
want to say more.
but you know what I mean? Like how much stuff I just want more and more and more and more and more stuff, but there isn't anything else to organize the society. There's nothing worth dying for, so to speak, for the nation. I don't think that if someone said, "Come and die for the king or the flag or something," I don't know that would organize people as much as back in the days if the king said, "We're going to fight in the name of God," for instance.
I mean, I can jump and tie this into answer the first question, tie this back into the point I was trying to make, especially about the truth and why I think religion is bad. So, just first on the Jordan Peterson question, what you think? What I think Jordan Peterson was doing, and it's an interesting one because that video was Richard Dawkins. For those who are listening and don't know, it was Richard Dawkins, who's one of the most renowned professor as well within the atheistic world. He's one of the most renowned individuals. And then Jordan Peterson, who is a very well-known clinical psychologist, who is also highly intelligent from 2 fundamentally diverse worldviews. Dawkins is like, no, Christianity and religion is nonsense. And then Jordan Peterson is like, well, that's important. And they're both highly intellectual. That conversation what Jordan Peterson was doing there, for me, is a clear example of why religion is a problem. Because truth stops mattering. What he did in that video, in my view, at the end part, particularly the part that you're referring to, is something called survivorship bias, right? It happened I think it was during World War II. Oh, well, there's a classic example of entrepreneurs, and the most successful entrepreneurs in the world dropped out of university. Therefore, dropping out of university is a good idea. No, it's a pretty stupid idea. Do you know what I mean? Don't drop out of university. Stay. Go and finish your degree, right? Because, or the World War II one, where there was an idea about planes that came back from the runs, they'd have bullet holes in their wings. And then the idea was, we need to reinforce the wings. It's like, no, these planes came back. Therefore, if they have bullet holes in the wings, it means that they're the ones that survived. We need to reinforce, we need to find out what happened to the planes that didn't come back because they weren't reinforced in the right places and fix that. It's a psychological bias that's happening there. And even someone as intelligent as him is trying to find a way of turning that around and saying, well, societies that haven't existed, all societies that have existed have been successful are the ones that have had that have had the virgin birth and that whole situation. But it's like, well, what does that mean? That means nothing. We start losing truth.
So I don't fundamentally agree with you, and I think it's important for me to say something about that.
Sure.
So what I think you're picking out there, right, which I agree with to begin with, is that Jordan Peterson has a clear bias towards the Judeo-Christian Western perspective on religion. And so when he makes these explanations, is effectively making an apology for the Judeo-Christian Western civilization. Okay, but that does not mean that the fundamental idea that he's pushing is wrong. Okay, those are two different things, and you can separate them, because even what's it called? The other guy,
Dawkins.
Richard Dawkins, shares the same underlying biases with Jordan Peterson. They're two sides of a coin, right?
Yeah.
So, and what both of them do is use their intellectual prowess in the pursuit of the survival of the West in the way that they understand it. But what I suppose, so once we understand and agree on that and take that out of the equation, knowing that, you're basically, this is what you're dealing with, don't get too distracted by it, just hone down on what's being said here. What the point that Jordan Peterson is making, and I agree with you as well, that sometimes he goes to great extents, and I've learned from him and from a few other people never to do this. So if you're committed to an idea that you believe is correct, that you believe is true, and you try to defend it under all circumstances, you will make lots of errors. And this is what I have learned personally, that don't do that. Okay, once your idea gets pushed to its limit and it's beginning to fail, accept. Don't just keep insisting, but because once it doesn't make it not true. All ideas have a limit. So just to give you an example that I'm sure you're familiar with, or maybe even more familiar with than I am. So Isaac Newton's mechanics, is physics around mechanics, got us to the moon, but it's an incomplete description of the world. It fails completely at some point, completely. Right? It doesn't get you all the ideas of a black hole, but it doesn't mean it's useless. I mean, it got us to the moon. That's all we needed to make a rocket to get to the moon. And I think what people begin to get touchy about is once their ideas get to the limits, they don't want to accept it. You've got to accept it. And I accept it that Jordan Peterson pushes and pushes sometimes, not realizing your idea has reached its limit. Doesn't make that idea wrong. And the fundamental idea is that there's more to life than true or false. I mean, we know this. We know this as a fact. So that claim itself is a fact. There's more to life than true or false. And you can't organize society. In fact, you can't organize your relationships. You can't organize society simply on the basis of what's true or not.
Agreed.
You can fly planes that way, which is the examples you've given, Cross. And I totally accept that. But human beings are not planes. Human societies are not planes.
And to be fair, even in relationships, with your child, you don't always tell your child the truth, is it? Until they're ready, for instance, because you try to protect them, right? So you might not want to tell them that. I don't know. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but there might be times when actually you tell your child a lie to protect them.
Yeah, truth very. And sorry, you were you about to jump into the comment?
No, I was just going to the comment. I was going to say we got two comments there, but if you're on,
keep them out, and then if you're all right with that, Jab, let me just dive into very quickly, summarize the key points why I think religion is bad. But the first, shout out to Farouk for joining us a bit remotely via the comments. But religion has historically played a significant role in shaping societies, influencing moral values, and even acting as a unifying or controlling force. However, as civilizations evolved, other institutions like the state took on similar roles, offering governance, purpose, and ethical frameworks. 100% agree with that. That is very, very, very in line with the initial argument I was giving about how it's just a tool which can be replaced by anything else. But if I may just quickly fire off those 5 points. Truth is one point. That you start losing truth, and you'll see why this is important. Because there's an inverse, as I'm sure we're all aware. There are lots of studies that have been done philosophically, sociologically, and even psychologically around the relationship between intellectual capability or intelligence fundamentally and religion. Religion tends to work on those who are slightly less intelligent because it, again, requires a suspension of belief. When you stop using your intellect, you stop using the intelligence that you have because you start suspending that to focus on key ideas, and which for me is problematic. When you see highly intelligent people like Jordan Peterson willing to suspend logic and truth and start focusing on things that don't make, and he knows these things don't make sense. But to your point, Yemi, he's trying to extend beyond that. He wants to go to the stars. It's like, no, you got to the moon, stop there and change the kind of jet fuel you're using.
Sorry, I need to interrupt you. I know you've got 5 points.
Yeah.
The thing is, this is what happens, right? This is what happens. I used to hold this view back in the days when I was a militant atheist, right?
Yeah.
Okay. My view on that has evolved. I think that no. So I think that actually what happens is that they compartmentalize, right? They compartmentalize. So they switch between the professor of psychology or whatever it is, intellectual, whatever, and then there's the religion box, right? And so sometimes what you find is when there's a conflict, they look for some sort of interpretation that would make sense, right?
Yep.
When that collapses, that's when the patient is challenged. That's when the person then develops cognitive dissonance, right? So they become really uncomfortable, and then they start to. So I think that's what happens. I don't think that we can say that religion makes people. So we can't say that only stupid people practice religion, if I can put it that way, right?
I agree.
Have very, very intelligent people. What they do is that they compartmentalize. That's what they do. But
maybe I wasn't clear. So actually, I need to clarify that just so it's people are not imagining that that's the case. I'm not saying only stupid people are religious. There are loads of intellectual people, which is exactly why that video is important, because that's showing one of the smartest celebrities, shall we say, that we know within the intellectual space.
Let me interrupt you again. So take for instance now, when I used to write for Sahara Reporter, I wrote about Oshimbanjo, right? He's a professor of law. He's become the vice president of our country, and to all intents and purposes, he's a very, very smart individual. But he goes to Redeemed, and there we have Pastor Adeboye coming up with ridiculous claims like his car driving on empty, and he's raising all these dead people everywhere, curing this disease and that disease and all of those things. So there you go. Why is he there? So I don't think it's stupid, but I think what he's doing there is he's compartmentalizing. Religion is very important to him. So to carry on and get that purpose, because he's a lot of the meaning for his life comes from, because it's a way of life, right?
Yeah.
It comes from that religion. So he needs to keep it. He needs to respect it. He needs to practice it. So he does that. And it comes with all of that baggage that you're talking about. And then on this other hand, he does his law and he does it really well.
I agree. But I wasn't talking about that though. Yeah, sorry, let me go on.
No, I was just going to check. Would you hold the same view of him if he was a member of Kegate's Palm Wine Club, where they kind of talk, say some stories, some mythical stories about how the world came to be, which in traditional African religions we do have, but don't proselytize, and they don't. Would you feel the same way about him if that was the context?
Is that me?
Yeah.
No, because
is the question clear?
No. I think the question is clear. No, so my point is that my view has evolved. My understanding now is that actually humans are able to hold contradictory ideas in that same brain that we've got. We can hold 2, 3, 4 different contradictory ideas and notions, and
I don't. So I don't even think at some level that they are necessarily contradictory. So again, I'm not talking about, and you'd find someone like Jordan Peterson and even Osibanjo, I imagine, if you sit them down and probe them, will not insist that these ridiculous claims are true. I suspect so. I suspect when you sit them down, they wouldn't. As you're saying, Jordan Peterson trying not to do that there. He's saying,
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that. I think.
But did you see Jordan Peterson doing that there? He's clearly not admitting. He's clearly saying, yeah, I can see that these claims are extraordinary and probably not true. You can see that he's actually admitting that.
No, Yemi, I disagree there, because I guarantee you that you will find professors who believe literally that Jesus was born of a virgin, that he went to heaven, cured all of these diseases, or that Jonah actually was in the belly of a fish. And there are people who believe these things in a literal sense, and that's the point that we're talking about, because because there are people who believe that, and these are people who are highly educated. But as I was saying, they put them in two different boxes, right? And that's when you move from fundamentalism to extremism, right? A fundamentalist believes this thing verbatim. That's what happened. It's black and white. But then when they start to act on those notions to the point of causing harm to other people, you move into the point of extremism, that right? But there are extremists who are very, very, very highly intelligent, well-educated people with certificates and all of those things. So
Absolutely.
I will contend that there are people who believe. So I think the point here is that I think people are able to hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different.
Yeah, but the challenge I'm throwing on that one is not necessarily about the most intellectual people. The issue is that intellectual people are able to find ways to handle cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
The less intelligent generally are not. That is my point. My point is that it creates a state in which people who are not able to still at least hold two views now supplant their intellectual views and the idea of truth with this belief system. So you'd see this, for example, with people who go to churches and stuff, and they're like, well, God's going to provide for me this week, and they're not going to get a job because I don't need to get a job. They've supplanted intellect. They're no longer the compartmentalization.
Mindset,
exactly. So it replaces the logical, intellectual piece, which I have a problem with. I don't like seeing people go to church and saying, this week God's going to provide for me. How? Well, God will provide. So then you just go home and sit down. And I've met people like this who stop using.
So I think I've got an explanation for this. Sorry that I keep interrupting.
No, that's fine.
So to understand that, you need to understand what happens in Nigeria. So this is especially a problem with churches as opposed to mosques, right? How many times do churches hold? Take any church. How many services do they hold in a week? We're not even counting Sundays, because people have like 3 or 4 or 5, services, right?
Yeah.
So the point I'm making is that Monday, Tuesday, every day of the week, you go there, they're talking about healing this person, healing that person, healing those people. Now, it's worse than that. It doesn't just end there, because same people will come and give testimonies and say how they were healed, or how when the pastor prayed, they got money, or they got admission, or they found a wife, or do you know what I mean? So when you hear this thing, because look, people like, what did Hitler say? Hitler said, or they realized that in terms of like programming people, when you repeat something so many times, it becomes true, right? So that's what happens. So what you find in our society is that people, it's reinforced. It's like it just keeps going like that, and we got healed, we prayed, and so it gets to the point where we've got problem in the country. We've got religious leaders telling us all we need to do is to pray more. The reason the society is where it is because we're immoral and we're not praying enough. So I think that becomes a form of conditioning itself. It becomes a form of education. It's like when you go to school and you learn about, whatever subject it is, right? That's what happens.
Oh, have we lost Jab?
I think it's frozen.
And then,
there we go. It's back.
And then they carry on with this superstitious mindset to the point now where they believe that if they had an exam to do, they can just pray and it will be fine. So I think what you're saying is true, but I think it's a different explanation from the first point you were making, if you see where I'm coming from.
Yeah, so it's a bit around indoctrination, but again, the indoctrination would work generally on the less intelligent, the average person, or slightly less, because the average IQ is about 100, right? So it's normally distributed. We need to keep in mind that half of the people in the world fall, or half of the people in any general population fall within that lower bracket. So if we've got even half the people who are less intelligent, they're going to be more susceptible to dealing with that problem, or dealing with that challenge, or handling that indoctrination, that consistent feeding of propaganda or standards or systems or miracles or whatever. The more intellectual ones would either separate completely from religion and say, I'm not doing that, or they'll compartmentalize them and utilize it when it needs to be utilized, which prevents that issue. And I'm talking generally, I'm talking about why religion is bad for everybody, rather than it just being bad for an individual person, for a very highly intelligent one, or particularly or less intelligent individual, etc., stuff like that. I'm saying generally for population, it's a problem. We lose truth. We start losing the application of intellect in society. Third point, implications on human behavior as well as a challenge, because religion teaches us more than anything else about segregation. You are a group and your group matters. Everybody else, you guys are all separate and you people are a different thing.
It's
We start
divisive.
treating- It's very, very divisive. It separates people into groupings. You are the good, these are the bad. Everybody else is a bad who doesn't fall within your definition of a good, which is problematic for society. It creates systems, almost like caste systems, because you think, because I'm following this religion, I am good, you are bad. Fourth thing is generally around ignorance as well. Ignorance is reinforced. It ties into the second point I was talking about, intellect, but ignorance is reinforced. You don't need to research too deep into things. Stop asking questions. And I'm saying this from my perspective, my experiences. We talked about this before. Around the experiences that I've personally had around asking questions. My journey through religion was, I went to a Christian university. My father was a reverend as well. So I had church services I was attending since I was a child. I read the Bible through and through. By the time I was, I don't know, 12 or 13, I'd read the Bible in its completeness. But I believed everything that was in there. I was fundamentalist, just like, to the point that you raised there, Jab. I was thinking, yeah, donkey definitely was talking to, I forget his name now at this point, but the donkey was definitely talking. When Joshua looked at the sun and said, stop, and the sun actually stopped, I was legitimately believing it to that fundamentalist perspective until, I refused to think deep into that. And I'm not saying I'm particularly intelligent, or I'm not. That's not even relevant. I stopped looking. I said, I'm not going to check to see whether this makes sense. I'm ignoring whatever it is. I'm choosing to be ignorant, which causes issues with societal development. And then the final piece is around motivation and drive. Religion stops people, and this ties into all of the other things that we've kind of laid out. But motivation and drive dies with religion. It stops people from looking for that solution to their problem or their challenges, tying into things that we've said before. God will do it, something's gonna. And then as a society, that causes problems. As a society, we require people to have a focus on intelligence and intellectual prowess and intellectual achievements. We require people to have that motivation and drive to move us forward to the next step. We require people to get rid of ignorance and say, I want to be the most intelligent or most knowledgeable that I can be about either specific topics or generals in some way to make those different changes. We require people to think about truth and focus on truth rather than things that are not necessarily true. I think and we require that separation the removal of that separation of us thinking this group is good, you are bad, which religion does. For me, those 5 points are a key reason why I think as a society, we need to get rid of religion. And to Farouk's point, he's thrown a couple of comments and I'll just put them on in a second. But to Farouk's point, exactly those points are the key thing. We can replace these things because it's a tool. We can replace it with the state. We can replace this with laws and policies that aim to be agnostic and that aim to unify people, that focus on truth and then drive that motivation and intellectual achievement over everything else, rather than focusing on some random moralistic viewpoints that were created because somebody said, you know what, you shouldn't wear clothes from 2 different types of cotton and grass. Yeah, no, you ain't doing that. That's my fundamental view about this. Is it all right?
There's nobody who obeys that law today. Absolutely nobody.
That can replace it.
No, nobody obeys that law of don't wear clothes from 2 fabrics today.
There's some fundamentalists that do, though, and that's the thing.
Certainly not within our own Nigerian context. Nobody pays any attention to that.
No,
most people haven't read the Bible as well. They just go to church and listen.
But then again, it goes back to that morality thing that we're talking about, right? So we've got slavery, the people killing people. You say nothing about that, but then you are legislating on what type of clothes or what fabric people should wear, and don't eat to animals that haven't got, let's say, hoofs. Say, for instance, like a pig and that sort of thing, right? So again, it goes back to like we say, if religion started at the beginning of humanity, human infancy, it totally makes sense that it would not hold up under scrutiny to the values that we respect and that we value today, because times have moved. We're talking 2,000 years down the line. In the last 20 years, how fast have things moved? But everything you've said, I think in the last, particularly points 3, 4, 5, I am entirely aligned with that. I agree with that. However, I still think that, because you're talking about getting rid of religion, I'm not sure that is the right step, because I
I
think
actually put it to you that you can't. It's just a.
no, I don't think you
It's
can.
just an idea. It's not. It's not
Yes.
practical. You can't do it.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. But I do see value in it. And so I'm aware of time. I know we're 12 minutes past the time, but I'm talking. So in terms of value, because I'm just reading what Farouk is written there.
He has a few comments. Do you mind if I just run through his comments?
Sure,
Because
sure.
they're a bit stacking up. So the first, it said the state, much like religion, can serve as a mechanism for control, laws, enforcement, nationalism, a geopolitical force, diplomacy, war, alliances, and a source of moral guidance through the legal systems. That's his first comment.
I
The
agree.
second comment that he had,
Yeah.
agreed as well. Same with that. Is Jordan Peterson is a Western apologist who expresses concern over the decline of Western influence and civilization. I agree with that as well. That's my viewpoint too.
Absolutely correct. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then he emphasizes the importance of personal responsibility, particularly amongst Western men, and argues that civilizations require myths to thrive. I agree to a degree, but
I agree with
obviously
him.
it comes back. Yeah, but
I
this
agree
comes
with
back to
him.
the point I
I
raised.
agree with him.
Yep, it does come back to the point I was
I agree
raising
with
about
him.
how
So
overall it causes issues. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Yes, but this is the point I'm going. This is where I'm going to. So societies, to organize a society is really very hard, because when you start to have, okay, how do societies start? Or like a town, it probably starts from a family, a unit, and then with time you have uncles and cousins and everybody. Then you become a little hamlet or whatever it is, and then you have another adjoining family, and then it becomes hamlet. So the point is that as it starts to expand, you need to have common values. And I feel that religion is absolutely essential. Some sort of mythology, even if it's not religion, you need something around which society organizes. And I feel that religion ticks all of those boxes. And that's why religion has been very, very important in sort of spreading empires and culture. We can look at this in terms of Islam and how they conquered, most of Asia, including right up to Spain, do here, or how Islam is used to resist Western imperialism. And you can look at, because the thing that Jordan is saying, Farouk, absolutely spot on. I agree with you. He's a Western apologist, Jordan Peterson. This is the point he was making. So to your point, Cross, it's not. Both of these people are true, just from a totally different perspective. Because how did Christianity, the empire itself was centered around, because the mission was, we are going, the Great Commission, which is going to the world, preach the gospel to all nations, civilize them, right? The Western imperialists took that culture, took that instruction, and made it into the white man's burden, which is, we are the Christians, we are the civilized guys, we're going to go and civilize all these people. Except that what they did was spread barbarism. They made civilizations, and they brought upon them barbarism, all in the name of bringing religion. And the people, so I'm going to tell you this story in closing very quickly. I went to church the other day with my kids. My idea was to just expose them to different religions. And when we went there, this pastor connected from Kenya, I think he was, or Tanzania, somewhere. And what he was doing then and was that he'd taken the gospel to them, right? And there were all these Maasai people dancing in church and all of those things and stuff. So this is in 2025. And I kind of thought this was what these people were doing 2, 3, 4 centuries ago. And I can't believe that it is happening in this age, because you are clearly not respecting those people. You are saying that your culture is superior, your religion is superior. And this is what, whether pastors or evangelists or the missionaries, whether they knew or not, whether they were intentioned about destroying African culture or not, the point was that they were very useful in bringing about the idea that Africans are inferior. Because when someone goes and he says your way of life, the gods you believe in, your all the things that you hold there, the icons that you hold there, these are actually quite barbaric. You should get rid of them. That person destroys you. Now, they may have been doing that totally with good intention, right? Believe that that regime, they may not have been imperialists, but they served that purpose to expand the empire. So
Mhm.
to apply it to Nigeria or Africa, or this because that's where we are. We've got two dominant religions now. We've got Christianity, we've got Islam, competing ideologies in many ways. And I know that in places like Ilorin or Western Nigeria, people have, well, even my own family, we have managed to sort of coexist, but there are always tensions. And our own religion totally gone, our names gone, our languages gone, right? So I think that we do need something. I don't know what some sort of because today when you say to a Nigerian, what is Nigeria? It means different things to different people because there is nothing at all that organizes us and says that this is who Nigerians or Africans are and this is how we need to organize ourselves. I'm going to leave it there as food for thought. I don't know whether you guys have any closing thoughts.
Yemi, you want to go first? I'll do the
Yes, I can. Very briefly, I will try. So I do have closing thoughts. I think my feeling around this, having kind of been keenly listening to all the very good points raised, is that the idea that we can design something to take the place of religion seems to me to be an ideal idea. It's never going to happen. What tends to happen is whatever people take up to tends to be something that arises organically from the nervous system, basically. It's from our brains and our minds that these things arise. So what you'd find in Nigeria, for example, now is, people who look away from religion will take to things like Afrobeats. And so it's usually the same form of stories and music and rhymes and things like that. And believe me, what you will get there is not necessarily any better than the religion you're running away with. You only need to, and I'm not going to call names of any artists, listen to some of the lyrics, and you can see very quickly that this is partly why, things like Yahoo Yahoo, and, they just kind of foster it again. It's the same mechanism that's generated religion, that's generating this. Once we strip it back to what, for example, Jordan Peterson is saying, without paying attention to his apologists, this is what he's saying, that these things just crop up once you have human groups. And if you get rid of religion, whatever replaces it, you would still have the same problem, which is that you would have to find ways to moderate the artifacts of the negative artifacts of it. That problem will not go away.
I think my view is, I think I've been pretty clear about that one, especially in the last 25 minutes. I think religion specifically is bad, and the key reasons are that it's all right when it's controlled and it's within a specific set of moderate systems around it. It can be good, which when we're going back to the initial conversation we had at the start of this piece was that, well, religion is just another tool. Now, to your point that you've raised there already, Yemi, about how it's difficult to replace it with anything else. I mean, this is hypothetical, but in my world, I will get rid of it completely and then use an objective assessment mechanism rather than something that's been created by a bunch of councils. Council of Nicaea, which agreed on divinity of Christ, etc. The first and second councils, which were defining things around that, which is a select group of people defining things for the world. It's saying no.
Are you going to get rid of music as well, or are you going to regulate the lyrics?
No, I mean, you can sing whatever you like. It doesn't matter. If you want to sing about, fish and chips, it's like, oh, have fun. You know what I mean? If you want to sing about Jesus, whatever, it's up to you. Sing about whatever. But in terms of
and Yahoo Yahoo, and have you heard some of
yeah,
the
if you want to sing about Yahoo, it's fine. But we can implement religion through more. Oh, we got Farouk at perfect timing as well. So to close this out, we've got systems that we can use to apply religion in an objective, democratic way. Because at the moment, we don't have that. We've got a set of rules that have been imposed on us by a bunch of people who decided what they thought was right. If we have a more democratic system that utilizes the same platforms as religion, that decides, do we want truth or not? Do we want specific ways of morality or not? Do we want segregation across groups or not? We don't have that. We can replace religion with another tool that has a very similar sort of setting and set up, which would make a perfect, no, maybe not perfect, but a perfectly reasonable, perfectly workable substitution for religion that doesn't rely on ancient, older definitions of what morality is. That's my stand on that one.
But to counter you, well, Farouk, welcome. We'll let you have the final word. But to counter that, we have been focusing, remember, on Christianity and Islam mainly. We've got to remember that every human society has its own religion and has its own culture, because after all, religion is culture, right? So we've got to remember that. And some societies don't have this black or white thing. There is nuance. We haven't even talked about heaven and hell, and punishments, benefits, and all of those things, and how religion can be abused, and the harm and all of those things that it causes. Some religions, I think, have a bit of what you might call balance.
Absolutely. I would actually say that the religions become a mirror of the people rather than the other way around. And I agree.
Absolutely.
It becomes a mirror of the
I would agree with you. I would agree with you. And my beloved China, for instance, they are atheist, if I can put it that way, but they're guided by, I would say, a form of religion called Confucianism, right? Which is a 5,000-year-old civilization, and they had a blip for 100 years, and look where they are now. Type of thing.
So Cross is not into that. Would you get rid of that as well? 5,000 years, it evolved at a time when we knew nothing.
Well,
Shall we?
I think the
do away with it?
No, but the difference, something like Confucianism, is a good example. It comes from Confucius, but it's evolved over time in a way that Islam and Christianity, are not evolving. They're not allowed to evolve to that same degree. That's my challenge with it. So we've still got things like, say, within the Bible, within both books, the Bible and the Quran, that have very strict restrictions around how people can behave, which are being utilized to affect the vast majority of people.
Yes. I think what we need to do is to insist and build what they call the rule of law. So the rule of law is what subsumes religion, and that's what Europe has kind of done to an extent. Okay, so you don't need to actively go after religion, right? You just need to make sure and insist that laws that are passed by the assemblies are obeyed, whoever you are, right? And then that's a good start, for example. And eventually,
but then if you do that, sorry, I'm going to counter you. But then if you do that, you then end up again in the situation that Jordan Peterson was talking about, which is that you destroy that fabric, you destroy that power, you destroy that mythology, and then the society no longer holds. That's what he was bemoaning there.
There's a risk that would be partly what happens, but and that's not just what he's been bemoaning. Again, I'm not putting up a defense for him at all. I've already kind of made my case about him seeing everything through the lens of Western civilization, and making a case for that, and also not being able to accept where his theory, because all theories, believe me, all theories, even the fundamental theories of physics, they fail at some point. So Isaac Newton's theory fails at the level of gravity in space, and then Albert Einstein's theory fails at the level of the singularity. Right, this is how it is. Every theory fails at some point. You've got to recognize where your theory has hit its limits, which he is not doing. But the point that I am making basically is that you have, you do have a collective unconscious. Okay, we can't run away from that. Okay, there's nothing, and it doesn't respond to these truth claims that we make all the time around whether or not you're flying a plane to the moon, or you are. How your car works with gas, right? Within your home, with your family and your kids and the truth is not all that runs that unit, right?
No.
There's way more to that than the truth. And that's the point that he's making about human societies. You can't rely on what is true or not.
I'm going to have to stop you there, Yemi. We've got 5 minutes.
We've got Farouk. Hasn't said anything.
4 minutes. We've got Farouk. Let Farouk have the final word. Hi, Farouk.
Well, apologies, I couldn't join in the stream earlier, but I've been following the conversation and I've left a few chats, some of which you've covered. I felt, I felt sorry for Cross when he was going on about all of the drawbacks of religion and all it causes. And it left me wondering, what's the alternative? Like, what's the realistic alternative? What's that?
Some hypothetical ideal.
Yeah. What's that alternative? And if you can think about the alternative, then, and I think we can have another conversation about it in another session. What are the alternatives to religion? And what might be their drawbacks? And in one of the charts I put on earlier, I did say that over time, the state has essentially, in certain societies, certainly in Europe and elsewhere, the state has begun to replace religion in terms of creating a story, direction, a myth, a legal framework, and a moral framework. Yes, the state determines morality as religion did 2,000 years ago. And the state,
sentimental value. Sorry to
yes,
interrupt there. When
yes,
England is playing in a semi-final, there's no one on the street. There's no one in A&E. There's no one
yeah.
doing
So,
evening shifts. Like this is
yeah.
this is what religion used to provide.
And so if we agree that certain things we create can replace religion or has replaced religion in certain societies, then what are their drawbacks? They can become overbearing, they can become sectional, nationalism, fascism. These are things that evolve from the state, which, and again, just to set out a fundamental premise of philosophy for me, is that like the state, like religion, like God, I think these are all things that humans evolve. Science, economics, healthcare, these are things humans evolve to answer questions about our existence, about how we thrive, and about how we survive. And with all these things, they would have limits. Boris Johnson famously said about Islam and the Ottoman Empire about a fatal conservatism that made the empire collapse. And I think Cross did allude to the conservatism within religion as a whole. And someone else talked about how the more Eastern and African oriented religion have a bit more nuance. An area of interest for me recently is the Yoruba traditional belief, and how an African belief, and how that allows how that is more accommodating and allows a bit of uncertainty. So I've been listening. It's interesting. We can have another session. I don't want to drag things on, but Cross, what are the alternatives, and what might be the fallback of the alternatives? Because I don't think there are easy answers here.
You trust me, I've got quite a few views. But yeah, I agree. We need another street to do that one.
So what I will do, guys, when we finish, I'll send a short video. I think it's about 10-minute video that actually ties into this discussion that we've had. Have a listen to it. Let me know what you think.
Put it in the chat as well, so we can share with anyone who's watching. So they've also
right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
let me see if I can put it now.
Yeah,
Right.
no, that's a good idea. So I think it's been a really good session. It's gone way beyond how we intended. We're at 1 hour 30
28
minutes.
minutes. Mm.
That's Farouk's fault.
Yeah,
Yeah, we blame you, Farouk.
for that. So,
I will take responsibility for the 3 minutes I spoke.
all right. So we want to thank our viewers. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed the session. We will hopefully see you same time next week, which is 7 p.m. every Sunday. Thank you very much.
I'll put the video in the chat just now.
Fantastic. Okay. Adios, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye now.